I want to bring in former Republican presidential candidate and retired neurosurgeon, Dr. Ben Carson, right now. Dr. Carson, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
Let's kick it off with yesterday's meeting. What did you make of it? We were all watching for any awkward moments, knowing what these two have said about one another. But do you think that meeting will help unify the country?
Well, it was well coordinated and all the right things were said. The question will be, will there be the appropriate follow-through? Will they continue to meet? Will there be an effort to make sure that Donald Trump succeeds, as President Obama said? And if that does happen, it will be a new day, a new beginning, because there have been so many seeds of discord sown over the last several years. And we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. And yet, look at what's going on out in the streets with the riots. Look at the CEO of a company who says, you know, if you supported Trump, you know, send us your resignation. I mean, these kinds of things are un-American. But I do believe that there are forces behind them that are trying to divide us on the basis of everything. Because if the American people can become dissatisfied with what we have, it makes it easier to fundamentally change the nation.
Well, I was making the point earlier that, you know, these protesters are listening to the media. I mean, the media told one narrative about who Donald Trump was throughout this election, and that's the narrative that you know, some people heard. And we also know that Donald Trump has said many times that he wants to change a number of things that President Obama put in place. So that was why it was a little awkward yesterday. Repealing and replacing Obamacare was a campaign promise from President-elect Trump. More than 100,000 people signed up for Obamacare on Wednesday. It was the busiest day since enrollment began on November 1st. Do you think the Republicans have a plan to replace Obamacare, Dr. Carson, and what should that replacement look like?
Yes, the philosophy behind the replacement is something that puts the power back in the hands of patients and healthcare providers and minimizes the role of third parties. You know, what happened? What happens for good health care? A patient and a healthcare provider along comes the third party to facilitate the relationship. It becomes a primary entity dictating to everybody else. That doesn't make any sense. It costs us money and it's unnecessary. So that's why you've heard President-elect Trump talking about health savings accounts. Because those are under the control of the individual. And we can pay for them with the same dollars that we pay for this incredibly inefficient system. Bear in mind, we spend twice as much per capita as many other nations that have much better access because they don't have the level of bureaucracy and special interests involved in health care. Health is your most important asset. And that's why, you know, the Marxists, the Leninists have all said, when you want to gain control, you gain control of health care. And then everything else will come along with it.
Dr. Carson, it's Dagan McDowell. Always great to see you. But in terms of changing what has already been put into place in terms of the health exchanges and the regulations and the penalties, how many years would it really take to implement something new that covered the same number of people?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's going to take an excessive number of years. To realize that in Washington, there's a mentality that everything as complex is going to take forever to do. I think that's why, you know, there was criticism of Donald Trump when he opened his new hotel. Under budget and ahead of schedule. See, they don't understand those words. They don't know what that means. But they'll find out what it means. Because if we can do things logically that make sense, and we'll do them gradually, because there is concern about those people who have gotten insurance who might not have it under another plan. We're not going to just throw those people out in the street. We're going to gradually make the change and then present something that they will absolutely love, something you won't have to coerce them into. That's the American way, not forcing people into what you believe is the best solution.
Dr. Carson, speaking of the American way, there's so much anger in our country right now, and we're just seeing so much divisiveness. You're somebody who was up against President-elect Trump, and then you joined his side. Your name's being floated as possible Secretary of Education, possible Health and Human Services. As someone who was up against Trump and then joined him in his work, would you advocate that he gets out to some of these communities where there's so much anger right now and try to sort of create some inclusiveness going forward?
Well, he will do that. you know, people will get to know him. They get to realize that he's a very reasonable person. He's not this demon that, you know, they've tried to paint him out to be. That will become increasingly apparent. And he recognizes that you cannot make America great again if everybody is fighting each other. And we have much more in common with each other than the things that separate us. So let's work on those things. Let's talk about those things. And we should all be interested in our children and what's going to happen to them in the future. And then one other thing to remember, we have radical Islamic terrorists who want to destroy us. Why would we facilitate their goals by trying to destroy ourselves? It makes no sense.
Dr. Carson, do you think you could see yourself as Education Secretary?
I could see myself as continuing to help improve the educational environment, the healthcare environment, and many other things. My preference would be to do that from outside of the government, as a friend, as an assistant, as an advisor. If it can't be done that way, you know, I will do whatever is necessary to make sure that we succeed as a nation.
Who do you think should be out there in terms of a leadership position in terms of bringing us together right now? I mean, you see these protesters you know, in several streets across the country. What should we do about it, Dr. Carson?
Well, I would love to see the media actually start emphasizing, you know, bringing us together. You know, you have to realize that media can be very powerful. During the civil rights movement, they were absolutely essential to getting us on the right track. They've gone off track themselves subsequently, but they could come back. And every time I see a young journalist, I talk about integrity in journalism and how that could be such a help to our nation.
Yeah, you would think that is something that people want to be helpful in terms of, rather than, you know, acting out, which is what we're seeing right now. And Dr. Carson, real quick, when do you think we will get more clarity in terms of Donald Trump's team, whether it be the cabinet or the people that he is planning on putting around him? That would certainly also be healing for the country, wouldn't it?
Yes, well, over the next few weeks, you know, a lot of things will become much clearer. But, you know, good decisions have to be made. We're not talking about political decisions. We're talking about decisions that will allow success. One of the reasons the Trump industry around the world has been successful is because he's put in place effective people, not just friends.